All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been going through a series of video presentations based on some of the articles that are out on the docs.microsoft.com site. And I'm starting by going through the getting started with ASP.NET MVC5. So far I've done part 1, getting started, part 2, adding a controller, Part 3, adding a view, Part 4, adding a model, and Part 5, creating a connection string and working with SQL Server Local DB, which means I'm on Part 6 of 11, which is accessing your model's data from a controller. So I'm going to start with that right now. And it says in this section you'll create a new movies controller class and write code that retrieves the movie data and displays it in the browser using a view template. We're told to start by building the application before going on to the next step. It says if you don't, you'll get an error adding a controller. Now, I'm a day later than when I did the first 5, so I may or may not have built it yesterday, but it won't hurt to do it again anyway. So build solution. And I don't see any errors that came up, and that's always a good sign. In the Solution Explorer, right-click on the controllers and click Add Controller. So, in Controllers, in fact, let's close a few things that we've got open here. There we go. Let's right mouse click and Add Controller. Now we are in the Add Scaffold dialog box, and this time we're going to choose MVC5 controller with views using Entity Framework. All right, notice it says it'll give us a controller with actions and razor views to create, read, update, delete, and list entities from an Entity Framework data context. So when we get done with this, we're going to call this Movies Controller. You're going to notice that under Views, we're going to see a Movies Controller down there. So we've got MVC Controller with views using Entity Framework, clicking Add. And as you can see, it says for the controller name, down here, we want Movies Controller. Select Movie MVC Movies.Model for the model class. Select Movie DB Context MVC Movie.Models for the data context class. All right, so the completed dialog, which is shown on page 4 of the handout, is also shown on the screen here. Movies Controller, let's just click over here. Movie DB context, and they want us to make sure that the generate views, reference libraries, and the user layout are all in there, and click Add. Now the author says if you do get an error message when you do this, you probably didn't do a build first, so go back and do a build. All right, so now I've got a new Movies controller right here, and also notice that I've got a new Movies view, which has a create, a delete, a details, an edit, and an index in it. All right, so in other words, Visual Studio here automatically added CRUD capabilities. CRUD for create, read, update, and delete. All right. This is known as, we actually used scaffolding because we had code created for us. We now have a fully functional web app that lets us create, list, edit, and delete movie entries. So they tell us to save and run the program. And we're told to click on the movies link, but we're already there, so there we go. So this browser request right here, okay, it's the same as if we left the index off, etc. Now we've got an empty list of movies because we haven't added any movies yet. We're going to do that in just a moment. Let's click on the Create New link that's here, and notice what we get. Now I'm using the same stuff that they have on page 6 in our handout. So it's when Harry, it says meet Sally. We can always go back and it should be met Sally, but that's okay. And for the release date 1/11/1997, the genre is comedy, and the price is $6.99. All right. Then we're supposed to click Create. And notice we now have a movie. Now it says you may not be able to enter decimal points or commas in the price field. To support jQuery validation for non-English locales that use a comma for a decimal point, you must include the globalize.js. Mine work fine, so I'm not going to worry about it. When we clicked the Create button, it caused the form to be posted to the server. And the information was saved to the database. We were then redirected back to the movies, which is our index page, so we can see the newly created movie. It says we are to create a couple more movie entries and also try the edit, etc. So let's do that first. In fact, let's try the edit here. And let's change this to when Harry met Sally. Save. You'll notice it's changed. Let's create a new one. I don't know. Star Wars. I don't know when the release date was. When was the original Star Wars released? May 25th, 1977, over 40 years ago. May 25th, 1977. The genre, I don't know, science fiction. And we'll give it a price of $9.99. Create, so we're told to enter a couple of these, so let's enter one more. And let's put in Deadpool. Release date, well, that's a good one. I know that the new Deadpool is either just about to come out or is coming out, so. And that was February 12th of 2016. Genre, we'll put action. And $11.99. Click Create. We now have 3, all right, in here. Notice I can click and get information on any single one. If I want to, I can also delete it. I'm not going to, so we'll just leave it there. All right. Now we are told that, in fact, I'm going to stop the run here and here. And we are told to go in and open up our movies controller. It says, examine the generated index method. A portion is shown on the page here. This right here is what returns all of the movies. Okay, it returns all the entries in the movies table and then passes the results to the index view. Now, the line that we have right here, this line, instantiates a movie database context. We can use that context again to query, edit, and delete movies. Okay? Again, as always, I'm kind of bopping back and forth. Oh, did I remove that? Lovely. I'm moving back and forth here between the code and this document itself. All right, I'm on page 8 of the document. So we've done all this. We did that. We had the blank one. We created one here. And now it has met there. Why do I have meat on mine? All right. We just looked at the generated code. So there we are. Strongly typed models in the @model keyword. As mentioned here, earlier in the tutorial we saw how a controller can pass data or objects to a view template using the viewBag object. Remember, we talked about this before. ViewBag is a dynamic object. It also will allow you to pass, etc., work with any type of data, but it is basically meant to be used with smaller pieces of data. As it says, it's a convenient late bound way to pass information to a view. When something is early bound, it's decided at compile time. For instance, in most programming languages, not all, but in most programming languages, when you create an array, the array is created at compile time, and that's the reason you can't change the size of the array in most programming languages. All right. In some programming languages, the array is late bound, which means that it's decided at runtime. So when something is late bound, it's decided at runtime. So it's while the program is running, you're allowed to make changes. All right. MVC, as it says there, also provides the ability to pass strongly typed objects to a view template. This enables better compile time checking of code and richer IntelliSense. The idea is, remember here, what we're doing is we're working with data that eventually we are either sending to a database or retrieving from a database. So what we want to make sure we do, is we want that data to be valid data. All right? As it says, the scaffolding mechanism in Visual Studio used this approach. In other words, it passed a strongly typed model with the movie's controller class. So it says here, in this controller, it says, examine the generated details method. Well, let's actually just take a look. You can see it here, but let's double check and make sure that's the code that's in details. I don't think I have details opened. There it is. And you'll notice we've got the title, the release date, the genre, and the price. All right. Now it says here the details method is shown below. That did not look like what I saw in the details method. Whoops, sorry. I think I'm looking at the wrong file. Let's double check here. Oh, it's the details method inside of the movie's controller.cs file. So it's this one. Now we've got to look for details. There we go. So what does the author say right here? The ID parameter that you see right there is generally passed as route data. For example, if we said details /1, all right, it will set the controller the ID to 1, so it basically would be the first movie that's in there. If a movie is found, the instance of the movie is passed to the details view. That's what we get right there. Now we are told to look at the details.cshtml file, which is right here. Now it's interesting. This is not exactly the same. All right. We've got DT and DD. The DD is display data. I think the DT, I don't know if that's that could be the name of the title. All right. And the author says here, by including a model statement, which is what we have right here, at the top of the view template file, we can specify the type of object that the view expects. When we created the movie controller, Visual Studio automatically added that at the top of the file for us. This allows us to access the movie that the controller passed to the view by using a model object, not only a model object, but a strongly typed model object. All right? So the system knows that when it does this in here, the code passes each movie field to the display name for, all right, and the display for HTML helpers with a strongly typed model object. All right, it says examine the index.cshtml view template and the index method. So let's look first at the index method that's in our movie controller. Not much in here. Return view db.movies.toList. This code creates a list object and it calls the view helper method in the index action method. All right. When we created the movie controller, Visual Studio automatically included at the top of the index.cshtml file, again, this thing that you see right here. Now, this is a little bit different, this add model. It allows us to access the list of movies that the controller passed. And again, it uses a model object that's strongly typed. The code loops through the movies by doing a for each statement in here. So it's setting everything up here, and then it's going through, and for each movie that's in there, it's displaying the title, the release date, the genre, and the price. Ideally, what we'd expect to have happen. Now, the good news in doing all this also is the fact that when you look at it, all right, we're not writing any of this code. It's all being created for us. Now, because the model object is strongly typed, each item object is passed as, is typed as a movie. This means that we get compile time checking of the code and IntelliSense support. All right, so for instance, I'm going to just remove this, and I'm going to put in here item dot, oh, I thought it would have taken this up for us. Item dot, there we go. Notice there's genre. So it put it in for us. That's the compile time checking and the full IntelliSense that we just mentioned a couple minutes ago. All right. Now, if we look up here, notice we still don't have anything in the app data. All right. So does that mean it's not there? It may be there, it may not be there. But as they mentioned on page 13 of the handout, It says entity framework code first detected that the database connection string that was provided to the movies database that didn't exist yet, so code first created the database automatically. You can verify it's been created by looking in the app data folder. If you don't see the movies.mdf, and I don't, click the Show All Files button in the Solution Explorer. So here's our Solution Explorer. There's the Show All Files button. There it is. We are told to click refresh, but it's not going to matter. It's there already anyway. All right. Now, if we double click this file, watch what happens over here. All right. So I'm going to double click and okay, in our Server Explorer over here, if we click on tables, all right, or we look on the databases and we click here, there's our movies table. You'll notice that next to the ID field, there's a key, meaning it is a primary key. Now, I do want to mention this. The author says here, and I'm on page 13, so I've fallen a little behind on here. We'll catch back up. But the author says right there, for more information on EF and MVC, see Tom Dykstra's excellent tutorial on MVC and EF. All right. This is the one that we're going to do last. This is a very, very, very extensive tutorial. Okay, now, here we go. If we want to take a look at the data that's in there, okay, we can right mouse click on movies and choose Show Table Data. Might take a second. There it is. There's our 3 titles. There's our release dates, our genres, and our prices. Can we make this bigger? No. Let's see. Change font size in Visual Studio 2015. Options from the Tools menu, Environment, Fonts and Colors. Tools, Option menu, Environment, Fonts and Colors. Says we're at 10 point. Let's try to make it 14 point. And I usually like to use an Arial font, so let's see if we can do that. Okay. And it didn't do anything. In the show settings for select text editor. We have that. Modify the font options and change the font face and size for all elements. Well, we set 14. Arial, fonts and colors, but it did not change. Change that, I guess that's what it changes. It changes the code, but it doesn't change what the size is of the stuff that's shown in the database, unfortunately. So, if we want to see the table definition of what we created, we can close this, but I can right mouse click and say Open Table Definition. And there's our ID, our title. Now we're going to have to eventually make some changes on this because right now the nvarchar is a max unless we want to keep it like that. And this price could be 16.9.99. So we may want to change that stuff as we go on. We'll see. So this is the schema that we created earlier. The entity framework code first automatically created the schema for us based upon our movie class. Now they say here, when you're finished, close the connection by clicking the MD, by right-clicking the movie DB context and choosing close connection. Well, first thing I'm going to do is close this. There. All right. So they say right-click movie DB context. I don't even see that here. Right there. And choose close connection. All right. They say if you don't do that, you could conceivably get an error the next time the project is run. All right. So we now have a database. We have pages that allow us to display, edit, update, and delete our data. In the next tutorial, which will be number 7 of 11, so in our next tutorial, we'll examine the rest of the scaffolded code. We'll also come in and add a search index method and a search index view to allow us to search for movies in the database. Now, you're all bright enough to realize that the way this currently stands, it's not hard to go look through our database because we only have 3 or 4 movies in it. All right? And finally, the last thing that they say in this particular handout here, in the one that we're on right now, again, the author at the very bottom here says, for more information on using Entity Framework with MVC, see creating an Entity Framework in an MVC application. All right, and I think is, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're going to be looking at that later. All right, so we're right here accessing your model's data from a controller. Again, that is part 6 of 11 that we are now finished with. All right, so we are going to go on into part 7, which, as you can see, is examining the edit methods and edit view. And as always, I'll be back with that shortly.